Our guest today is Ziesche. Hi, Lee. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So before we get started, can you tell us more about yourself and line of work that you do?
Yeah, sure. So I work for a nonprofit, a small nonprofit called Sane Energy Project that was originally founded to fight a pipeline in the East Village about 10 years ago. But pretty much we were part of the organizations that were fighting fracking. And now we continue to fight frack gas infrastructure. And then also kind of on the flip side of that, fight for the alternative of that, which isn't just replacing fossil fuels with renewable energy, but replacing a system that's, very extractive and exploitive with a community-owned renewable energy.
A very exciting week of actions in the fight against the North Brooklyn pipeline. Does it feel like there's momentum growing here? And how have you been involved in this particular last few days or week?
Yeah, and there's been a couple times within this fight where I felt like, wow, we're really gaining momentum fast. We've found out about this pipeline about a year ago. And just where this campaign is, say, compared to like the Williams pipeline fight, which took 3 years to stop, I feel like we're almost at that same point, just in a year. And I think a lot of that has to do with the communities along this pipeline really understanding the threats since they've been dumped on for so long. Always I felt like this campaign was growing really fast. But in the last week, it's just kind of, exploded in size because there were these actions where people locked down to the pipeline, so our Twitter followers like doubled in a day, and things got, thousands of views, and we're actually kind of scrambling to get our organizing on the back end ready to get all those people into the fight. So yeah, I think, momentum is growing exponentially. A lot of people just still didn't know this pipeline, was being installed because there's so much construction always in New York. So I think these actions also really alerted the local community to what's going on. And, our role as Sane Energy, we've been fighting this pipeline on a couple different fronts. We've been fighting it in the regulatory space. National Grid, in order to build this pipeline, they need to raise our bills and get rate recovery for that. So that's happening in this very opaque, hard to access proceeding before the Public Service Commission. But we pretty much recognized that, things weren't going to be settled in time for that. So we've also, been doing, especially before COVID, a lot of in-person events, and we've kind of started bringing those back up. But, we have been supporting these direct actions. And, technically, when direct actions happen, Sane Energy is a nonprofit, so I'm off work at those moments, but we've helped train people for direct action and provided some media support and things like that when things are actually going down.
As you know, we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and the election is 2 weeks away. So why is this the right moment to protest, do these actions?
Yeah, and I think a lot of the problem is like a lot of times we think of these things in separate silos, right? But the pandemic is actually very much related to this pipeline. One, our bills are about to go up to pay for it, and people are struggling economically right now. Before the pandemic hit, I was actually only part-time at Sane Energy, and I was working in restaurants, so a lot of my coworkers never went back to work. And I'm imagining them right now having to pay more for this pipeline. It also really connects to our health. Frack gas is very, very dirty. The fossil fuel industry has tried to put forth this lie that this is clean, but there's a lot of studies that show when people are using gas in their homes, it's actually creating a lot of air pollution. So, our communities, people were hit very hard by the pandemic here in New York, and a lot of people survived, but they, are facing things after, respiratory issues and things like that. So I think it's very concerning to be increasing fossil fuel pollution in a time like this. And, no matter what is going on, like the clock of the time we have left to do something to prevent catastrophic climate change, obviously climate change is here, but, really locking in the things that are going to make the planet completely unlivable, that clock is ticking down really, really fast, and, when it comes to electoral politics, no matter what, whoever gets elected, Trump or Biden, we're still going to be fighting fracking and frack gas afterwards, right? And, there are definitely differences there. I would much rather organize against Joe Biden and fight against him for these things, obviously. But that doesn't really change our, on November 4th, our fight is going to look very much the same on a local level. So we really just have to do that now. And gas is about to be running through phases 1 through 4 of the pipeline. That's from Brownsville up into kind of East Williamsburg, Bushwick area. So we don't have time to wait, and that's why people decided to take action and put their bodies on the line, because time was running out and it was so clear our elected officials were not going to stand up.
So Lee, you're a veteran of working with projects that bring information about the dangers of fossil fuel to the public awareness, and including you're a filmmaker, you work on DSA's Revolutions Per Minute podcast. So what lesson have you learned about communicating about pipelines with people who may be new to the fight, and what are some misconceptions that they might have about the North Brooklyn pipeline?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a couple of different things. Like, I think getting people to understand that this is, a lot of people in New York understand that fracking was bad, but they didn't understand that, hey, we're still bringing that gas into our communities and that these pipelines in our streets are actually related to that. So a lot of just getting people to understand that, no, this isn't, clean natural gas coming into their homes and their communities. This is fracked gas. But that's also then created, some kind of misinformation. People are like, oh, they're fracking in Brooklyn. This is a fracking pipeline. And so you have to be very specific about the language. Like, no, this is a fracked gas pipeline. It's delivering gas that's been fracked in Pennsylvania. And I mean, I think a lot of that awareness too, like I mentioned before, was just letting people know this isn't the typical construction that we see everywhere. I just walked around my neighborhood in Bed-Stuy, and every single corner, they're digging up something to add in for a new condo. So, getting people to recognize that this was, something that actually threatened them, and isn't just like a water main or something going in. And I think the other big thing is getting people to understand how connected they are to this. A lot of the big pipelines we fight, it doesn't have this direct connection of, we're actually going to pay for this pipeline. Millions of New Yorkers pay National Grid gas bills, and everybody that pays that in downstate New York, they're about to see a rate hike if National Grid gets approval for it. And so I think a lot of our communication is just letting people know, as you mentioned, like, there's a pandemic going on, there's a crazy presidential election. How does this pipeline affect them? Aren't there pipelines everywhere? Like, yes, there are, but this one directly impacts you in this way, and you're going to be paying for it, is something that I've seen really, resonate. And we also have to do a lot of work too, not just to communicate to the public, but kind of organize the media, right? Their whole thing, like, I went to school to be a journalist, and it's like, well, present both sides. Well, like, if National Grid is just going to lie, it's not, journalists have to do more. And, and I understand a lot of journalists are like, they're one man crews, and they're very undersourced. So a lot of our work is just making sure that journalists actually have the right information and kind of being prepared to counteract, National Grid's lies about this pipeline.
In a statement, National Grid claimed that by entering an active work zone, protesters presented a public safety hazard to the workers and to the community. What do you say to them?
I would say that they're the safety threat. One, everybody that took direct action, really made sure safety was always our priority. We're doing this to protect our communities. And it was National Grid workers that were, very aggressive and screaming and pushing people. But yeah, I think that's John Bruckner trying to, deflect what the real safety threat is. We know this pipeline is going to contribute to climate change if it is allowed to have frack gas flow through it. We know that gas is coming from the Marcellus Shale, which is highly radioactive and has the potential to start building up radioactive material at scale in this pipeline. We know that when it gets burned in people's homes, it's not good for, it creates indoor air pollution. Then there's always a risk of a leak or explosion. So National Grid has said a lot of things that aren't true. And I think they're just really trying to deflect that they are the safety issue, and that what those people did by chaining themselves to the pipeline or other parts of the construction site was, protecting the future safety of that community.
There was an incident that was captured on the North Brooklyn Pipeline Instagram account, and we see a construction worker disagreeing with the protesters, and considering how important the role labor would play in the Green New Deal, how do we diffuse tensions between workers and activists? And what would you say to the construction worker?
Yeah, and I would say in general, there was only like one or two very aggressive national grid workers. A lot of their workers, backed up right away and were even telling the other workers, to like, hey man, just chill out. Like it's cool. We got the day off now. So whenever we do actions, we always make sure that there's somebody there to talk to the workers, to try to diffuse the situation, to let them know like, hey, we're not against you. We're against National Grid, this big corporation that is forcing us into an energy system where you only have a choice to work for a gas company. They're making it so hard for us to develop renewable energy. So some of those jobs don't exist for people. Like I'm from Western Pennsylvania. My mom's best friend's son is working for a fracking company. And, whenever he comments on my Facebook wall about something, I'm always like, there's plenty of things I could say, but I'm always just like, dude, I am fighting so that you can, get paid the same amount and work in a job that is not poisoning you and the community, because that's the truth, especially on the, extraction end where this gas is coming out of the ground. Those workers are being exposed to radioactivity and toxic chemicals, and they have no idea. My mom's friend, her son was like, we love nature, and like he has no idea what he's being exposed to. So yeah, especially in those moments where workers are like screaming at you and really disrespecting what we're doing and not hearing you, it's hard. And I think we need to just keep building better relationships with labor organizers and really have workers understand that we want them at the table and that we're there to protect them. Because a lot of these workers that are installing pipelines could very easily be retrained to install geothermal. There's just so many jobs needed to install air source heat pumps and solar panels. Like there's unlimited work that needs to be done to make the transition that we need to make. So yeah, it's super important that we're communicating that to workers, and we always try to do our best. And then while also keeping, our friends who are taking action safe at the same time, because tensions can get really high.
Okay, so let's imagine that this campaign is successful, right? And the pipeline does get shut down. What would happen next? What would be the next course of action?
Yeah, I mean, I think the next course of action, even if the pipeline gets shut down, it's pretty clear that National Grid is not, is not a character that we can keep working with, right? Like they've lied to the public. They've continued to put their profits over the interests of the community. So I think for us to make the transition that we need to make, beyond just this one pipeline and to the renewable future we need, we absolutely need public power. So I think that's kind of the next step. There's also this proceeding that National Grid has right now before the public service about whether or not they're allowed to raise our rates, our monthly bills that we pay. And that's kind of been like dragging on because of all, the controversy around the pipeline and because of COVID and all these different things. But that is still going on. So I think people, no matter what, like we definitely should take that money out. We should not be paying for this pipeline, but there are other issues with that, right? Like there are a lot of people struggling right now to pay bills. So making sure that that rate case, that rate hike is never approved, I think is a really important kind of next immediate step. And then making sure that we just, we get rid of National Grid and Con Edison. We cut out the middlemen who are, jacking up our costs so that their shareholders get profits. And that's, about actually building renewable energy, that's community owned instead of this kind of stuff.
It feels like whack-a-mole sometimes. Like even if you win one, there's like another 5 that walk up, right? And then they spread out.
Yeah, I mean, it's always that. I mean, with there was this bigger pipeline, the Williams-Nessie pipeline that would have started in Pennsylvania, gone through New Jersey, and then cut through New York Harbor to connect to a pipeline off the coast of the Rockaways. And we beat that after 3 years of very intense organizing. And National Grid's like, oh, okay, well, we can't get that. We are now going to speed up construction of the North Brooklyn pipeline, and they're proposing an expansion of a liquefied frac gas facility they have on Newtown Creek, which is already a super fun site. as an alternative because they didn't get the Williams pipeline built. And now they're building compressed natural gas facilities in Staten Island. And so that's exactly why we need public power, and we need to actually replace the energy, because until we build, the solar, the wind, the geothermal, the air source heat pumps, they're going to keep popping up because this is their business model, right? And they're not like quietly being like, oh, cool, we can't do this anymore. They're trying to extract every single last dollar they can out of this system. And so, yeah, that's exactly why we just need to replace it with a better energy system that's more just, more equitable, less national gritty.
So I'm sure you've had a lot of new engagement via social media or what have you regarding, the recent actions. So there's a lot of amazing momentum around this. So if listeners want to get involved in this fight, remotely or in person, right, what could they do today to support this fight?
Yeah, so if you go to nonbkpipeline.org, there's some easy actions you can take. You can sign a petition to the mayor asking him to pull construction permits. It was really weird. New York City mayor's office told a news station yesterday, like, oh, this is only the approval is on a state level. And yes, the funding is a state decision, but the mayor's office, through DOT and Department of Environmental Protection, have given a lot of construction permits for this pipeline. So that petition is asking them to not skirt the issue, which is what they've been doing and claiming they have no power, but recognizing the power they have as our city elected officials and pulling those permits. We also have an ability to provide a public comment in this proceeding. And pretty much what we're saying is don't approve a single dollar for frack gas. And we're about very soon to put up a form on our website and also our Instagram and Twitter to kind of start filtering people into different roles. We're really hoping soon to have maybe some consistent rally presence there, which we would need so many things, people to hold down flyering and people to get food, like when you're fighting a pipeline, whatever skills somebody has, like, trust me, we need them, if it's like only being able to drop off a pizza for people, or, people can provide graphic design stuff. So I know people too have been messaging us a lot, and we're like a little bit backlogged on that, but we're trying to get organized. And we're actually learned a lot from people who have been doing mutual aid work the last couple, months about like, okay, when you have all these resources thrown at you, how do you, functionally get people funneled into the right stuff? So definitely keep an eye out for that. We're going to have a Google form to kind of get organized with that. But yeah, follow NoMBK Pipeline on Instagram and Twitter, because we post a lot of like, hey, we're down at the site right now, like we need you to show up. And we may be doing a fundraiser soon for people who have been arrested, just for some lawyer funds. There was no bail or anything like that. Also, you can frack at a BK, which is another group that has been fighting this pipeline. They have a jail support fund set up. So if you check out frack at a BK on Instagram, you can, throw some cash their way. But yeah, trust me, there's definitely something you can do.
Well, Ziesche, thank you so much for joining us. Keep fighting the good fight, and I will see you on the battlefield, I guess. Thank you.
Yeah.